number 4. And just to recap where we left off last time, we had a draft recommendation based on talking with some of our teammates in our first meeting, talking about what some potential gaps would be in our second meeting, and then talking with Kurt in our third meeting with a draft recommendation to direct the city to hire a consultant to basically do some sort of equity audit on what the current state is, and then offer recommendations for a path forward. Some of those components to include in that recommendation and a path forward includes equity programming recommendations, identifying community-driven solutions, and developing, or a path to developing, resilient feedback loops between the city and communities of color. So I sent out some ways that we would like to kind of dig into that recommendation a little bit, including thinking about what some of the tasks could be for the consultant, what some deliverables could be, the role of both the city, the community, and the consultant in a project could look like, and then what we would be wanting from an ideal firm, knowing that we are a government entity, and so we do have to follow some procurement rules. So we're likely going to have to go out with an RFP and get proposals from a variety of firms in order to move something like this forward. So I was thinking that what we could just start with is, since we've had a week since our last meeting, I'm sure there's ideas that have percolated. I'd love to know, I'm gonna go around the room and ask everybody kind of what you're thinking, if there's any of your thinking from our last meeting that's changed, anything that stayed the same, any outstanding questions that you have. And maybe keep your comments just to like a minute or two tops, and then we can dig more into everything as we're going along. Does that sound good? Awesome. So I know I'm putting somebody on the spot, so you can say pass if you are not ready yet, but Counselor Singh, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Kim. Happy to start, and good evening, everyone. I think some things that just come to mind for me, just thinking about the recommendation statement, um, we talked about like specifically engagement and outreach, like this being like focusing on external community rather than internal. So I think we should be focusing on specifically equitable engagement and outreach that happens with communities. So to adjust the statement a little bit, the recommendation maybe fund an external consultant to audit Tigard's community engagement and outreach processes and offer recommendations for increasing equity. Um, and then, yeah, so as far as that goes, that would probably be my suggestion. Um, in terms of scope of work, maybe informational interviews with City of Tigard staff that engage and do outreach to culturally specific groups and other marginalized community members that may not be traditionally engaged with city and civic processes as well as decision making. Um, as far as deliverables and outcomes, better understanding gaps, doing sort of like a gap analysis. I'm not sure if that's the term, but providing recommendations for improvement and streamlining more equitable outreach and engagement for more inclusive participation as well as access to city services and resources. So like my metric would be to see like in the future maybe have a Spanish interpreter at a city council meeting to help provide like for someone to Spanish speaker to provide testimony, right? That would be pretty amazing for me to see as like city councilor. So having that sort of as a measurement.
Thank you very much, Counselor Singh. Valerie, would you like to go?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree with everything that Counselor Singh just said. I mean, I think that external focus is very important. I've been thinking about this over the last week, and I think it has the opportunity to, help Tigard develop systems that are both sustainable and resilient. And I think that a focus on how do we keep this internal dialogue going even beyond the consultant's audit process, I think is important, because the dynamics and the populations will change over time. And so as long as we're cognizant of that, then we can engage with our communities in a really positive, productive way going forward. So so that would be my suggestion about that. um and thinking about firm qualifications, I think it's important to, if we're looking at, I mean, I know there's RFP requirements that the city has to follow as far as contracting goes, but I do think it's important that it's a BIPOC-led organization, because I think that has credibility within certain communities that is going to be important for this discussion. And so, we're thinking about scoring different firms. I would suggest that, that would be something that I would be in favor of. Um, and I think that the city definitely has a role to play in this, but I think it is something that the consultant should reach out and coordinate with the city about, rather than having the city be, saying, okay, here is what we think the process should be. I think there's a dialogue that can happen that can be very productive and very organic. So, Alex, did you have a question for me, or do you want to go next?
It's just to let you guys know that Jimmy's in traffic and he'll be here in 5.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Traffic is so bad these days, isn't it? So anyhow, so that's my thought. I mean, I came away from our last meeting very energized and feeling very positive about the discussions that we've been having. As far as laying the groundwork for something that's really positive that will allow people in Tigard to access government more. I think in addition to identifying gaps, I think more about creation of pathways too. Are there ways that we can help members in our community interact with government, and overcome some of these linguistic or cultural or sort of attitudinal barriers that I think get in the way of some of those discussions. So that's what I would ask a consultant is how do we build these systems in a way that is sustainable and resilient?
Thank you, Valerie. Kelly.
Hi. So I think my perspective is probably a little bit different. So I'm struggling with the idea of allocating money to a process that feels like we're already doing internally at this time. It feels like it's going to muddy the waters of a process that's already going, and it feels like it would be the wrong time to spend that money. It feels like right now what Kurt and his team are doing is almost exactly what we want to have done, except for he's starting with the internal team and teaching, like trying to train people on how to be more externally focused. So to me, given all of the fiscal demands that we have on our tax dollars and how many people want our tax dollars, it seems to me like this is money that shouldn't necessarily be spent on this at this time. I could see spending it later, like after Kurt's work has been in place for a few years, and then going back and saying like, hey, did we miss anything? Are there gaps that still haven't been identified? But to me, that's work that's already being done. And if you start adding additional parties and additional players, particularly players that have a financial incentive to find things, then you're going to create more chaos than we need. Like we're a smaller town, we have a limited budget, and so I think, like, for me, I'm having a hard time understanding how this kind of expenditure could be justified.
Thanks, Kelly. And Valerie, I see your hand, but I'm going to finish going kind of around the room, and then we'll have plenty of time for the discussion. And Steve, our last community member, if there's any questions that you have outstanding or any thoughts that you had since our last meeting.
Nothing specific. I would echo what how Valerie started, just feeling pretty energized after last meeting and the conversation that all of you had. I thought it was evolving to a good spot, and as I said then, I listened a lot, and tonight I'm looking forward to doing the same. And if I need to participate, happy to do that as well. Or if I have clarifying questions, probably is another key thing. But I'm interested in listening to the four of you kind of talk through what we bring forward. So
Thanks, Steve. So Jimmy, welcome. I'm sorry you got stuck in traffic, but I'm glad you made it.
I did, and I didn't run any red lights or anything.
So responsible. Just to recap the conversation so far, I asked us to kind of go around the room and just add in kind of any thoughts that you've had about the recommendation since last week, or any initial thoughts that you have around kind of what that contract or RFP could look like going forward. We've heard from others in the room. Councillor Singh asked to refocus the recommendation around specifically communications and that external focus. Valerie talked a little bit about some of the specific deliverables that she would like to see and some firm qualifications, including that it be a BIPOC-led organization. Kelly has mentioned that she has some uncertainties about if this is the right time to spend the money on the consultant, or if it would be better to wait until after Kurt's had more of a chance to do his work. And then Steve offered some thoughts about just here to listen and energized from our last meeting. So that is a very quick and dirty recap, but I would love to invite you to also share any thoughts that you've had since our last meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I have some thoughts. I am, and again, I want to center this on, I totally appreciate the work that Kurt is doing, because I really believe that it is necessary for the municipal organization called City of Tigard. And that's its focus. The position that we're talking about, the community navigator position, is not an internal position in my mind. That its center point really is an external group looking into the city and how the city works to be inclusive of the issues that the community has relative to them. I believe that there are consultants, organizations that have been doing this work and who should be the lead in doing this work. I don't have a problem with big 500 corporations that do auditing and do consulting. I don't have an issue with those organizations coming to the fore and saying, we can provide you with someone who can do this, what, and that. But I want someone who has a connection to the communities that we're talking about, who have the opportunity or the ability to be collaborative in the model and approach that they want to use to get information from those specific communities. I've been a proposal writer, a grant writer. I've been a grant reviewer at the federal, state, and local level. And I know that organizations that have the wherewithal inside of their organization to put together an RFP response can do so in a New York minute and do it well. And it can, all the I's can be dotted and the T's can be crossed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the ability to connect across the type of spectrum that we're looking at. So I think that given where we are in our process, and again, I've never really been interested in writing an HR description for what the community navigator is all about. Not to say that it couldn't be done. I've certainly done it before, but I don't think that's what our tenure is all about. I think we are here to push the envelope as to say, we think this is a necessary part of how our municipal government continues to operate going forward. And in so doing, we elevate the voices of the community into the narrative that the city is operating under. And so, yes, I want to spend public money planfully. I have never been a believer in just throw money out there and see what comes up. I believe that money should be utilized planfully. And at the same time, I don't want to see that, this humongous amount of scrutiny gets utilized when we begin to talk about organizations that connect with BIPOC communities. So, I want to make sure that if we're going to look at bringing a consultant in to work around how would you engage these communities? Tell us your strategy for engaging these communities. What's the methodology you would use? How would you measure your own success? What is it that the city would need to provide to assist in this effort? Those are the kinds of things that I would want to hear from relative to any type of consultant group. And I'm not sure that any one organization per se that we all have connected with, whether it be Apano or whether it be ERCO or whether it be NAACP or Urban League or some of the groups that are out there. I'm not sure in our community if any one organization could do it. I would be really excited if a collaborative group said, you know what, we could respond to this because we have these representations across our community populations. Anyway, I know it's a lot, but
Thanks,
I
Jimmy.
have thought about it.
Oh, I know. I was hoping everybody had since our last meeting. Thank you. Valerie, please go ahead.
Sure. So I just wanted to address Kelly's comment because I think that our discussion got a little bit off the rails last week, and we pushed Kurt into a position where I think he may have been feeling defensive of the work that he was doing, which, was certainly not. Your eyes are going very wide, Kelly. Do you want to comment on that? No, please.
No, I was just mentally agreeing with you. My eyes do that.
Yeah. And so I think that, and we say, oh, Kurt, are the things that you're doing impactful and working? I think that's an unfair thing for us to ask. And so I think that the work that the city folks are doing is fantastic. Certainly the folks that came and spoke in that first meeting are, very motivated and very well-intentioned about reaching out to their communities. I think what we're missing are the additional data points. And I think that's where a consultant really can step in and help. What Councillor Singh was saying about, identifying where the gaps are. What are the things that we don't know? And so working collaboratively once we have those data points to, for Kurt and for the other members of the Tiger team to say, here are ways for us to move forward in a productive and equitable way. I mean, I think that's really what we're suggesting here. I agree with Jimmy that, I think that there are things that some of these consultants can suggest about access that we haven't even thought about, because again, we're trying to identify data points. We're trying to identify where those paths are, where the gaps are. So that is my thought about this is not in lieu of the work that Kurt is doing. It is instead intended to supplement that work and help to build going forward. I mean, I think this is not going to get less expensive as we move forward. I think it's only, have I told you about my roof yet? So I decided to replace my roof because it's not going to get any less expensive to replace my roof in 5 years, which is when I was planning on replacing my roof. So, and as a prophylactic matter, I now have a new roof, but it was not the most wonderful experience. But I learned a lot about construction and the whole process going into it with a tropical storm bearing down, but here we are. So that's my thought on the budget aspect of this. I mean, I don't think it's going to get less expensive, and I do think that it is important.
Thanks, Valerie. Kelly, please.
Hi, sorry. So I totally understand everything that you're saying, Valerie. I really do. I think one of my sticking points is that Kurt seems to believe that his team can do this work. And when we asked him about it specifically, is this something that you believe that your team is on track to do and is working to accomplish? He seemed really confident in doing that. And in addition to the fiscal concerns, I feel like it would be very disheartening and deflating to a team that is energized and excited about doing this work, that is trying to do this work, that is getting a lot of guidance from their team leader on doing this work. And then we say, okay, cool, you guys are doing this work, but now here's this third party that we're going to pay money to also do the things that you believe you're doing. So I guess that's something that I'm struggling to reconcile in my head, in addition to the fiscal concerns that I've already talked about.
So Kelly, as a follow-up, if you're not in support of this recommendation for the reasons that you stated, is there another path that you would prefer that the group was looking at? Do you have an alternate recommendation?
So I have thought about this a lot, and my thought is that having an external audit is a good idea. It's just not right now. It's more of a let's give this team the time and the tools and the opportunity to do the work that they are trying to do, and then at a later date, then we can bring in some sort of external auditing team. Or if Kurt's team feels like they need that, if they feel like they need that extra assistance, then we can maybe look at that. But right now, they feel like they have it. And I struggle with trying to add another person in for all the reasons that I've already stumbled through with you. So later date for me, I guess, would be my recommendation if you wanted to sum it up.
Thanks, Kelly. Counselor Singh, please.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And yeah, for me, it is fundamentally about priorities. And we do have a limited budget, but it's really about how we want to implement equity and take action. We could wait, but to me, this is sort of an urgent issue too. Kurt is doing a good job analyzing the data and providing recommendations, mainly internally, with his team. I think there specifically needs to be a focus on how we do equitable engagement and outreach and how we implement equity. So this is about how we can bring in those who are not involved with city and civic processes and helping them access resources, and also be involved with decision-making processes. So Kurt, to me, to my understanding, is working on equity in sort of a broad perspective, which includes internal data, for example, staff, Tiger staff, employment, mapping out disparities, but eh, you know, the mapping solutions he was talking about. But to me, this is more about, let's just say, like, if I was a Punjabi immigrant who doesn't speak English, if I had a disability, what is being done to include me in these government processes? And I don't know if Kurt is focused on that. I think Kurt is, doing like a much broad investigation and analysis on this. So to me, whether it's an external, consultant or Kurt's team, I think a focus on specifically uh, on external engagement, and how to make that more equitable, should be the priority. And I don't think we should wait. I think, to me, in my perspective, I think we should be doing that simultaneously, whether it's external or with Kurt's team.
Thank you, Counselor Singh. And Jimmy, please.
Um, I am a big believer in inclusivity and not exclusivity. My sense with all of this work, whether it's being done internally or whether it comes from community voices, is that it's done in a collaborative environment. I feel that what tends to happen when I talk to the folks that I've talked to, and again, please understand that part of my experience comes from my lived experience, having worked with Multnomah County and the city of Portland and Beaverton and some of these other places where municipal electeds decide that they want to have community voices until community voices say they want to be heard. At which point in time, you run into a wall of, well, we're not sure that, well, we've got some things with public works that we'd like to do. And yeah, we'd like to do some things over here with parks, but, we really do think we want to have your community voices, but I'm not sure we want to have them just yet. And so I asked this, and again, I may be passionate about this. I'll have a challenge with that. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings or anything, but when the crap hits the fan, people come to the community and say, tell us what it is that we need. And then when the crap is cleared off the wall, then thank you very much for your community voices. And now we're going to go back to business as usual. There is a part of me that says when PSAB got together and talked to the department, and the department said, there's crap on the wall. We want to hear what the community has to say. So we gave them what our connections to the community said we think we might need. And then we waited. And we waited for 12, 15 months before it became an issue of, oops, we did say we were going to do some things and we really didn't do it. So now we're going to try and get back to that. Quite frankly, I think we've waited long enough. And I think commitment from the city relative to funding should be simply focused on, we need to make this happen, and we can do it under the stewardship of the fact that we are utilizing public money, but this is such an important piece for our community that we go ahead and do it. And I know, I haven't studied the city's budget, in its entirety, but I realize that if prevailing minds want it to, this will happen. And when I talk about consultants, I'm not utilizing the term audit in the sense of a financial audit. I'm looking at a discussion on how do we bring voices to the table that historically have not been brought to the table unless there is some type of a crisis. And so, I would like those voices to be heard. And I think that depending on the type of consultant that you utilize, that those voices will be heard. And then you can take that information to the rest of the municipal system and say, this is what the community has said. You asked for community voices. This is what we've said. Now let's go forward to the next step.
Thanks, Jimmy. Kelly, hearing all of this, have you changed your mind around kind of the sense of urgency and the timing? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but we do only have 4 committee members, so that is kind of where we're at.
No, I understand. I want everyone to know I have heard every single thing that you have said, so please don't feel like it has fallen on deaf ears. I do believe that it is being treated urgently. My understanding from Kurt is that all the work that they're doing is being treated urgently, and they are focusing on outreach. And so I guess for me, I'm still a why now, but I am just one vote. So please, you don't have to agree with me. This is just how I feel being on the budget committee. And I see all of the other different budgetary, the budgetary needs out there too. So I'm still struggling with this. So
Thank you, Kelly. And Steve just put up his hand.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in and kind of share my perspective a little more. You asked an earlier question about what we've been thinking about, and I kind of gave you a non-answer, but I was excited for what happened last week. So as I've been engaged now, this is our 4th meeting. For my position in the organization and the community, just really trying to pay attention to where are those themes coming through, where's that common thread, and so. One of the things I did is stepped back because we asked all of you to kind of look at the documents that we've provided as a kind of to ground ourselves. And so I did the same thing. And if you start with the community promise itself, so that happened a couple of years back. And the council was very deliberate in those 5 E's and then defining what equity means, right? And in that, again, I have the right here. We talk about having just and fair inclusion where all can participate and prosper. So I'm like, okay, what you came up with last week, that's leading towards the participatory, hearing their voices, having them involved in decision making. Then looking at our equity declaration commitment, very much the same theme is coming through there, but we tried to expand it and try to provide more of what we mean. And then going to the racial equity action plan where we start to get more granular, and that's the document that just drives our actions and decision making. And the one that where I could see this being a benefit is in many ways, but one thing that we're trying to achieve over time, and it's a long-term goal, is to create an equitable engagement guidebook. And so I'm like, hey, this is my own mind thinking about what some of the outcomes are of what this would look like, and then hearing the comments here, it still seems that something like that, or the intent of what that guidebook is for, is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing through this group, and so I'm not trying to drive what we're asking the consultant to do, but just trying to piece together things that we have. But then think back to, you heard from our team multiple times, right? You heard from teammates the first meeting, then Kurt the next meeting, or second, third meeting. And you heard from our, a couple of people that we said are navigating in their own right and tried to share their thoughts. And, I think Valerie and others all said, we're doing a really good job connecting with our Hispanic community, Spanish speaking community, but there's probably an opportunity in other places. And so I personally can only say, I don't know what I don't know. And so as we're trying to guide this work, I could see benefit coming through something that helps inform what I don't know, ultimately what we don't know as a team as well. So I would see the work that you're talking about being very complementary to what we're trying to do in this organization. We don't have the resources to do the level of work, and maybe it's not even appropriate if we're the ones doing that work versus someone else coming in helping us truly understand what our community needs, wants, and deserves. And so just my perspectives, I'm not trying to sway anyway, but I'm just trying to, as I've looked at our documents and the work that we've done, we've really talked about moving from concept to action. And so this to me gets to that action word of, yes, we all agree we need to do things. And so what are those things we need to do? So happy to clarify if I was just rambling way too much for all of you, but.
I think connecting that back, the recommendation back to how it really feeds into some of the city's values is really helpful. Thank you. Valerie, please.
Yeah, so thank you, Steve. I think that's a really great summary of, from the city's perspective of where this would fit. I just want to focus, because one of the things that I think Jimmy brought up that is very important is lived experience. And I think part of the piece that's missing is, our perspectives on this are different relative to what our lived experience has been, right? And I would hazard a guess that our community members of color, our community members who have a disability, our community members who have, other challenges that take them outside the mainstream, Oregon since 1856 model. I think their lived experience is going to add to the value of being in Tigard, but I think we need to provide a way that makes sure that we're hearing their voices. So I think what Councillor Singh said is really important to listen to. Because I think we don't know what we don't know, and we're not hearing what we can't hear because we don't speak those languages. We don't have those lived experiences. And so I think even within this discussion, I think our perception of how Kurt's reaction, what Kurt said last week, is different based on what our lived experience has been. So I would just say that, you know, my suggestion is that we take a step back and listen perhaps a bit better, and that we provide a mechanism for people to listen a little bit better.
Thank you, Valerie. So I'd like to suggest a path forward. So this is a consensus-based group. There are 4 voting members. Consensus is defined in the city, and I think generally is 75% of folks agreeing. And I do think we have that actual total consensus with the group about the recommendation, and then a 3/4 consensus about the recommendation moving forward at the current fiscal year. Does that sound accurate to everybody? So I'd like to suggest that we, oh, Steve, please.
Jim, just clarification on the last, you had 2 parts of that. What was the second part about?
The second part was that we have 75% agreement about moving forward in this fiscal year.
Gotcha.
About
Okay,
recommending it move forward in this fiscal year.
Yeah, thanks.
So if everyone agrees with that, then we do have consensus to move forward. And then I just want to ask Kelly, are you comfortable continuing the conversation, knowing that you disagree with it moving in this fiscal year, but continuing the conversation about what this consultant and project could look like?
Yeah, I've been a part of tons and tons of RFPs. This is easy peasy stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. Everyone feel comfortable moving forward with this as our recommendation, and let's build out some of the pieces? Okay, so I've been taking notes as we've been talking, because of course I have. So I'm just going to run through those and get clarification from folks. And if there's pieces that I've missed, I hope that you point them out to me. So we started today with the recommendation on the right, which was fund an external consultant to audit Tigard's equity current state and offer recommendations for a path forward. Councillor Singh redirected us to something similar on the left, although he said it more eloquently. So Councillor, if you'd like to tinker with this, please do. But fund an external consultant to review Tigard's current external engagement and communications efforts using an equity lens and offer recommendations for a path forward. A little more specific, a lot more specific.
Yeah, engagement, I would say I would add maybe outreach and communications.
Everyone feel comfortable with this recommendation? Wonderful. So some of the pieces that we've heard, so engaging with local community groups, and then Councillor Singh offered a very specific informational interviews, both with city staff, community groups, and individuals. And then something that wasn't said directly, but it's been touched on a lot, is about access to city resources for non-native English speakers and non-English speakers. And I think that that has been just a common thread through all of our conversations. So I would offer to include that in that task/scope.
Yeah, I agree.
There's gonna be opportunities to come back to this, but if there's anything that's come to mind right now that you would like to add to this section, please let me know. Give you a minute.
I mean, I think part of this role is forward looking, right? So I think it's identifying current demographics, but then identifying, you know, looking to create systems to help identify demographic trends. You know, so that we can anticipate issues going forward and anticipate where need is going to be going forward.
Is that fair? Identify demographic trends and how those will affect the city and how city services will be accessed.
Correct. And I think it's important too to, you know, understand that this is a plug-in to the city's existing diversity work, you know, DEI work. And so, you know, how to leverage good practices or best practices in a way that's going to serve future generations, I think. But I think it's important to acknowledge the outreach efforts that are currently underway in the city. And it may be that the consultant says, yes, what you're doing is great, but you need to expand upon them in these areas, or here are areas where, this department is doing this thing that this department should be doing or could be doing.
I think that's a great point to both review, but then also incorporate into recommendations the city's current DEI work.
Yeah, because I think what Steve said is very important, and that, there's a lot of work that's been done already, internally, in how do we develop systems within the city. And so this is an add-on to that.
Been keeping my consulting hat off for the most part, but putting it back on for some of this. This would be a very fun proposal to write. Sometimes with proposals around this type of area, it's nice not to be too specific about what the tasks look like. It gives the consultant more of an opportunity to provide suggestion.
Well, and that gets to what Jimmy was saying, right? About, asking the folks who are submitting for the RFP to be creative in their approaches.
Jimmy, please.
As part of task scope of work, something that focuses on collaborating across organizations. So my sense is, the city of Tigard is doing its due diligence around DEI. Tigard Tualatin School District is doing activities around DEI. There are large service providers that are doing similar kinds of activity. And, moving forward, these systems need to figure out how they work together. Something as simple as police officers in schools, SROs. That's both a City of Tigard issue, but it's also a TTSD issue. There are, human and social services that connect with the schools district. But if we run into folks who are unaware or unsure of, which organization am I trying to connect with, having that type of work through allows for better services for the community as a whole. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, reviewing how engagement is working across institutions within Tigard, not just the city, and how the city can better coordinate with others' efforts. Valerie, please.
So I'd add an N to coordinate, but I would also then add, including non-governmental organizations such as nonprofits and community service organizations.
Yes.
Took me a second to figure out what you meant by adding an N. Yes, spell check will be run before this goes before the budget committee. The live typing is never my favorite.
It's really hard, honestly. We've done a lot of it in the last 3 years.
Getting better every day. Councillor Singh or Kelly, anything that you'd like to add to the scope of work?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I probably add something about, maybe recommending how the city can operationalize and implement like equitable engagement. I don't know if that's just an idea that came to mind, but I think that's sort of what idea I'm trying to get to.
Sorry, how the city can operationalize and
implement equitable engagement and outreach.
I think it's a good segue over into deliverable / outcomes, and I know that is a very hazy line between the two. And some of the ones that have come up so far today. So equity programming recommendations, identify community-driven solutions. And then we talked before about developing resilient feedback loops between the city and communities of color. And then I added some of Valerie's comments earlier so that the communication between groups continues after the consulting engagement ends. We have Councillor Singh's deliverable of some sort of gap analysis, and I think Valerie's comment about trying to identify what we do not know that we do not know. And I think we've said this in several different ways, but I think it's worth saying in every way, which is pathway to more equitable outreach and access to city services, how the city can operationalize and implement equitable engagement outreach is really being the driving factor of what we're looking for out of this consultant. Again, question that Valerie had raised of how do we build these communication systems to be resilient? Valerie, please.
Yeah. Oh, I think Jimmy got his hand up just very slightly before I did. So Jimmy, you want to go first?
This relates to how city can operationalize and implement equitable engagement and outreach.
Yes.
The one word I think that needs to, if we can look at putting it in there, is to maintain. How city can operationalize and implement and maintain equitable engagement and outreach.
Great, thank you.
Last in the door should not be the first to go.
Thanks, Jimmy. Valerie.
I think it's also important to note when we're talking about outcomes that, you know, our focus is on race and ethnicity because it's visible, right? But there are other communities that will be served by this discussion that we're having. And, you know, for example, our LGBTQIA plus communities and, you know, our disabled communities or differently abled communities, you know, our senior communities. So I think it's, you know, there may be an aspect to outcomes that is translation to other communities. And I just wanted to highlight that because I do think it's important.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase that one.
Yeah, I don't want to make it too specific because I don't want to, you know, box in someone, but you know, I think that an outcome, and you could just flag it as an outcome, is improved understanding of how to build these pathways and you know, where our blind spots are even outside of our BIPOC communities. You know, I think the last few years have really shown us that some assumptions that I, as a woman of color, but as a, you know, heterosexual, cisgendered woman of color, make about the kindness of other people is not always accurate. So.
A couple other points that got brought up were recommendations about improving city access points, so where folks engage for services. And then to Steve's point, something around either creation of or contributing to the equitable engagement guidebook.
Yeah.
Kelly, please.
I'm not sure the right way to say this, but just helping the community or the city develop some sort of like success metric or measuring how effective their programs are going forward so that we can know, like, hey, we are reaching X number of community members that we intended to reach. I don't know if there's a better or more eloquent way to say that, but I don't have it if there is.
That's identify metrics for successful, equitable outreach and engagement.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to call on Councillor Singh if you had a comment that was going to piggyback off of this.
Well, I was just going to comment on it because I think we have to be careful when we're saying metrics, that we're not defaulting to the systems that we've always used to measure engagement, because there may be things also in terms of metric that we are not thinking about. So so there may be some creative suggestions and as far as what that looks like.
I Exclamation point, be creative. Counselor Singh.
Yeah, I like the metrics. I would say, some kind of apparatus like that would be helpful, whether it's a toolkit or a guidebook. I think that's important, but I think there needs to be sort of, I guess, a understanding and also recommendation of the kind of oversight of implementation, as well as accountability measures. So we can make sure we're following through on whether it's a toolkit or a guidebook or metrics. So because like things can go under the rug, like we can develop these plans and guidebooks and they can sit on a shelf and collect dust. So I think that's what we want to try to avoid.
So when I did consulting for strategic planning, that was one of the ways that you got it to stay off of the shelf, is by putting a page in there that said you will review this every 3 months. All right, anything else in deliverables and outcomes? Jimmy, please.
When we look at the discussion about metrics, somehow or another, if we can make sure that the metrics are not just a numerical metric, X number of people did X number of things, but that we also look to evaluate, for lack of a better description, people's emotional connection, their feeling state to the success of something. I felt good about this because I felt heard. And I know there's a term, and you're looking at evaluation methodologies that go beyond just, the hard numbers, that also look at, I don't want to say softer, but a different way of measuring than just beyond the numerical side.
Yeah, I've heard it sometimes referred to as like the descriptors, descriptive. Thank you, Jimmy. Okay, let's move on into kind of the roles of the city and the consultant in the community. So one of the things that actually Steve and I touched on, and we've included it in here, was that one of the roles of the city could be just to maintain kind of an arm's length distance, similar to like a financial audit, really not leading the work or doing like in a lot of the writing for it, but kind of having a project manager and then kind of letting the consultant really lead. And I think that was also, sorry, it's escaping me who made this suggestion, but the consultant coordinate with the city and really lead that process. I don't know if there's too much more, but if folks have any other thoughts about kind of the roles the city community consultant could play, Valerie, please.
I mean, I think one of the things that I did want to flag under this heading is that, everybody there's not a gotcha moment that we're looking for here. I think it's important to assume positive intent, both for all the folks within the city and then for the consultant as well. I mean, we're just trying to help Tigard be better. So that would just be my only suggestion as an addition there.
Thank you. That was one of our ground rules for this group, right? We're all assuming everybody has the best interest of Tigard at heart. Okay. So we talked about this a bit, and I will be the first to say I am not a procurement expert, so there may be things that we end up putting on this board that, due to rules, we may not be able to execute at quite the level that we're imagining, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be on the board anyway. So some things that came up were firms that have local ties, experience in equity programming, specifically in local government, BIPOC-led organization, firm with connections to unserved communities, and then some other things in here, including like in the review process, carefully evaluate the methodology, what the city would be required to provide as resources, and the metrics that the consultant would use for success. And that one thing we can put in an RFP is that we're very interested in partnerships or collaborations. That's something that I've definitely seen in RFPs before that I proposed on. If there's anything else that we would like to include in firm qualifications?
Back to that issue of provided resources,
Yeah.
metrics for success. Metrics for success should include quantitative and qualitative measurements.
Let's go back and use those words over here too.
I knew I would dust that off my brain somewhere.
I am embarrassed for myself not being able to remember those ones, but
It just, it's stuff. I got to press that button.
all right. Anything else in firm qualifications? Valerie.
I think one thing that's not on here, well, I mean, I guess experience in equity programming in local government. I think again, to getting to the assuming positive intent, right? I think, I think a firm qualification should be proposals on how to make the tent larger. What are we not thinking of when we're looking for a firm qualification that will bring more ideas to the table? So and that's a very squishy sort of thing, right? But I think that the folks who operate in the space are very good at understanding, okay, here's the qualification that you didn't think about. So it's what aren't I asking you in the interview question, right? So I would put it out there as, more of an invitation for firms who are submitting a proposal to tell us what qualification is important for this RFP.
Exactly.
Right. And then I had been writing things down in the parking lot that didn't really fit, but I didn't want to lose. I just want to go through them real quick just to see if there's anything that needs to be moved over or anything that we haven't discussed. So I think focus on external communications. We incorporated that into our recommendation. Interpreters at council meetings, included that in the review of language access. We've talked through some of Kelly's concerns with allocating money and the question of urgency. And then, yes, community navigator as an external position. Anything else? Valerie, please.
The question of urgency, I think, is interesting. If you go back to proposal, what are we looking for in a proposal? I think a timeline should be on that.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a big fan of sort of belly button gazing, which I think sometimes can devolve into belly button gazing. So I think that's important. I also think, suggestions about, and I don't know if this is a parking lot item or something we should include, but I think suggestions about external grant funding for funding some of this work, because the money is certainly out there, right? And so to the extent that we're having a discussion with folks, because Kelly's right, this is, that we have limited funds as a city. And, I think that there are sources of funding out there that, could help fund this position or work recommended by this position. So I think either as something that we would ask our audit team to help identify, or that, we include in the discussion of outcomes, I think that there's some potential here for external funding. I know that we've been having a lot of discussions with the nonprofits that I work with on social justice and, some large foundations focusing on social justice and equitable outcomes. And this work seems tailor-made for that sort of proposal.
Thank you. I added that into our deliverables, some funding suggestions.
I mean, I would put it sort of at the bottom of the list just because I think that's a sort of a separate discussion. But I think as a data point, I think this will go to serve, that work.
All right, so scrolling out, filled in a lot of boxes. And a lot of detail. I think we can move forward. So going back to our top boxes, recommendation is fund an external consultant to review Tigard's current external engagement outreach and communications efforts using an equity lens and offer recommendations for a path forward, with a lot more detail below. After talking through everything, do these still feel, both the suggestions and the details we've gone into, as well as this top line recommendation, feel like they gel? Okay.
If there was, I'm gonna put on a different hat for a second. If there was disagreements going forward as this goes out to a broader audience, where might that disagreement emanate from in the words that we're using? Fund an external consultant to review Tigard's current external engagement, outreach, and communication efforts using an equity lens and offer recommendations for a path forward. Where might that, if at all possible, where might that sting if you are someone that might already be working on something similar to this? Or would it?
Alex.
The reason I say that, let me just throw this out a little bit. I'm really cognizant of some of the earlier conversation, and I maybe have missed some of it, some of the earlier conversation about work that's currently going on in the city relative to engagement, outreach, and equity. I don't want, I hope that, there were no hard feelings or sense of, well, we're already doing this kind of work. Why would we want to do more of it or bring in someone else? I'm sensitive to that because I've certainly, as part of my experiences, again, I've worked with individuals in organizations who see something like this come up and say, well, what about us? Well, we're already doing this, or let's expand this, or, so how do we deal with that? Or should we deal with that?
I'm gonna let's have Alex go first.
Thanks. I'm sorry I have camera off. I have a child with an ear infection. She doesn't want to leave my side, so apologize. Thanks for the question, Jimmy. The word communications in here, I almost said this earlier, but then that was a good doorway for me to do that. I want to just make sure that what we mean by communications, and I only point that out because our communications team is focused on outreach and engagement, but also marketing, and communications as a whole kind of speaks to me more about marketing, which is what, is obviously a different sort of thing. And there's overlap between the two. So, maybe keeping that word is just fine, but sure, communications is, to me, internally means marketing as a large portion of that. And I don't hear you all saying a review necessarily of marketing strategies. It's more like that real community engagement. So I just wanted to flag that.
Thanks,
I
Alex.
think that's it.
Thank you. Kelly, please.
So if there's if I'm understanding you correctly, if there's concern about the word communications, if we had external outreach and engagement efforts, would that help? Would that help alleviate that internal sort of marketing language concern?
That would make sense to me. I mean, to Jimmy's point, I won't say much because I'm not here to weigh in that capacity. I think that, there probably will be people in the engagement and outreach realm that will have that initial reaction. But I don't think that that's a reason to not, of course, go forward with what you all are recommending. So the communications thing that I'm bringing up isn't even really related to that, to Jimmy's point, but just that I think that we should be clear if you want the consultant to do anything around kind of more marketing communications. So I guess I would, if I may suggest to maybe just take out that one word. It would be my thought. So yes, I agree with you, Kelly.
Does anyone have anxiety about removing the word communications and leaving it at engagement and outreach? Great. Let's make edits. Oh, that undid itself.
So hard to type live. No, I just wanted to, the lawyer in me appreciates the focus on what does the word mean. So
Thanks. So the last thing, and I wrote a really bad why statement while we were all talking, but I want to ask this group to think about this a little bit. And when we go to the budget committee, and I'm hoping to reserve a few minutes at the end for Steve to talk a little bit about what that's going to look like. What is the why? Like, what is the ultimate reason why for bringing forward this recommendation to fund an external consultant? Valerie, please.
So I think that's a good start. I think that it's not so much laying the groundwork, but we feel that this recommendation is important as a complement to the work that the city is already doing in the diversity space, to make sure that the residents of Tigard have a voice in their government.
Back to our community promise, the E for engagement says exactly that. So so I think that once again is consistent with what we're trying to accomplish starting a couple years ago. This is some of the actions that can support that.
Yeah.
So we feel this recommendation is important as a complement to the work the city is already doing in the equity space to ensure that all members of the Tigard community have a voice in their government.
Right.
I would maybe add not only a voice, but access to resources, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Services or resources?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, both would be.
Why? Why do I ask?
We're gonna make the font very small in this little box.
The box can grow.
It's probably even such things as just information. Not trying to even make it smaller, but
Yeah, getting back to that language access piece.
Apologize, I keep stepping away. It's really hot in my office, so I'm opening my door, shutting my door, opening my door, shutting my door. So.
All right. Any last thoughts on recommendation, the why statement, any of the RFP components for an external consultant?
Is there a why around the timing of the funding of this?
I think so, in the sense that it is complementary, right? So the work that's being done currently, this complements that work, and I think once we start building these pathways, it will enable us to be responsive to more situations as they arise and help, stress test situations that may arise in the future. But I think Jimmy's point is also important to note that, this represents an ongoing commitment by the city of Tigard, and not just a reaction to the murder of George Floyd, which I think, precipitated a lot of us to start having discussions that, about things that were inequitable that we were seeing, that, we were concerned about. And I've come out of a lot of those discussions feeling, frankly, much better than I thought I would going into them. But I think we want to continue to have those discussions within our communities, so that we're not scrambling, as Jimmy said, because we've dropped the ball. So I think it's an ongoing dialogue for us to continue to have.
So complements work going on currently and allows the city to be more responsive now, represents an ongoing commitment of the city of Tigard to equitable access for all community members.
Yeah, I would say now and in the future.
As well, what's the word I'm looking for? It's really important that we ground this discussion not only in terms of the now, but the fact that we really are talking about the future. Because if we look at the projections from Portland State, the region is going to grow. It's going to look different over time. And forward-thinking organizations will plan for that. The Tigard of 1962 doesn't really exist anymore. And there are folks who would tell you that the transportation process probably shows that. But, we are really on the building blocks of, where can the city continue to go as it grows? There's whether it grows toward Roy Rogers Road, or whether it grows, north or west of Bull Mountain, or wherever the next planned developments are. We're going to grow, and people are going to look different. And the systems that historically have seen more of the majority community are going to see more diversity. And that's not just in people, the actual people that are moving in, but the kinds of services that will be provided. There may be more counseling and human services that get brought in as folks come into play. There may be more food services. There may be more building services. I just looking again in my own experience, just in Tigard, just looking at the construction services. When I moved out here in 1994, the construction workforce looked markedly different. And now when I look at the construction workforce in the region, it has changed dramatically. It is browning. It is more ethnically diverse, racially diverse. And so that's just going to continue to grow. And so this work, and I say this to all of us, because, sometimes there are contentions here, but, this is really important work. And I, for one, am very proud to be a part of it, because none of this is easy. And we all bring some of our stuff, our lived experiences with us to this kind of discussion. And the fact that we can all sit here on our screens and talk through things that can be challenging at best. It just shows me how committed folks are. And I just want to say I appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Jimmy. I think that's a good time to stop sharing my screen and just say thank you all very much. You did it. Coming together over 4 meetings and really digging into the recommendations and the gaps and looking at all of our city resources and identifying the need. Deeply, deeply appreciate your time. I'm going to hand it over to Steve, and we had not talked about this, but to talk about kind of what happens next. I don't know.
Thanks, Kim. Reiterate what Jimmy just said, and Kim, thanks to all of you. Really appreciate it as we were thinking about this process going forward. I think this for sure met and probably exceeded my expectations. It's because of the 4 of you and what you shared and the different perspectives you brought. So thank you for that. Moving forward, as we talked about, a couple things. This is where Kim and Alex weigh in as well. So I'd anticipate a summary report coming out of this, not a PSAB report where it's a little thicker and a little more detailed, but a summary report, we'll call it, that we can draft and present that to the budget committee. That will be on January 23rd once again, so January 23rd. We have 2 main items that night and nothing else. So it'll be about the ballot measures that we have, and then the budget committee will be meeting that night. And so we'll bring it forward in that manner. I think we should talk about providing a report and looking at how and who does that, because this was really meant to be something that came from the community. So we should talk about that as well as we draft the summary report of who would bring it forward. At that point, obviously, we'd have a recommendation from us as well on moving forward, and then the dialogue by the budget committee to determine if they want to. I was thinking about this as we lead into it. It'll probably be helpful for us to share some of this background in the videos that we've had, and for those that have time to look at them or even review this last one just to prep them to move into the conversation, to get some of the context and the conversations that you've had would be another key piece, I think, to this. I have been sharing it with the council along the way, so I know many councilors have been engaged and just paying attention, but not the budget committee yet at this point. Kim, Alex, does that sound like something that you've been thinking about as well?
Yep, some questions I had, which was summary report and how do we who presents to the budget committee. So we'll stay tuned.
And maybe I can ask all of you, Kelly, you're on it, Council, you're on it as well, but Valerie and Jimmy, if you're available that night, and then we can come back to talk about the who will share some of the thoughts. So I think telling the story a little will be helpful for people to understand how you got to where you got. We will have a full agenda that night, I can tell you that. So we're going to have to really be mindful of everything happening, just even in the budget committee, because there's a lot of follow-up items from that one that many of you were at. So.
Right. Well, it
I
is
have put it in my calendar.
January 23rd. It is 5:51. I have, oh, Valerie, please.
What time does that meeting start?
6:30.
Okay. I have another board meeting, but it should be over by then.
We'll send out the agenda and everything to this group too. All right, 5:52, but I still never kept you past 6, and I'm not going to start tonight. So everybody have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you all so much. I echo everything that Steve said.
Happy holidays to everybody.
Yeah, happy holidays,
Happy
everyone.
Holidays.
Great
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tiger
all.
staff. Thank you, Steve.
Good luck,
Kim,
Kelly.
Alex.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye,
Yeah,
y'all.
everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.